Hello! Today I'd like to review a discovery set released last year by a Vietnamese brand, Majestic China Collection by the Annam. It contains 6 fragrances: Chinese Calligraphy, Mooncake, Pomelo Oolong, Princess of China, Spring Festival, and the Silk Road. So just by looking at these names, you already know what they are pointing toward. A consumer seeing this list would probably immediately understand, oh, this is China. But the problem begins right there. Do Chinese people think about the Silk Road every day? No. Do Chinese people think about calligraphy every day? Most of the time, also no. Do Chinese people think about Spring Festival every day? It happens once a year. So the China presented by the set is not the China happening in everyday life, but a China that has been culturally distilled and organized into 6 clear cultural symbols. The title is Majestic China. But to me, China is too vast and its culture is too diverse. It cannot possibly be fully expressed through 6 perfumes. So to me, this collection feels more like a stereotypical olfactory exhibition about Chinese civilization. The Annam is, after all, a perfume brand from Vietnam, and the brand has long worked with Asian cultural themes. Its works generally translate Asian culture into scent in a gentle, accessible way that international markets can easily understand. But when we discuss this collection today, to me the most important question is, what has it translated China into? Where does it succeed, and where does it fall short? Let's start with Chinese calligraphy. On their website, the official description says that it evokes the stillness of a scholar's studio, where technique meets introspection, and that it is a quiet homage to the brush strokes that shaped the Chinese civilization. I find this English phrasing very interesting, because some of the words in it are not what I would immediately associate with Chinese calligraphy as a Chinese. For example, stillness or the word shaped. So when we think about Chinese calligraphy, we think of movement, abstraction, the flow of energy, spontaneity, or spirituality. Chinese calligraphy is not a static object. It is more like the trace left behind by a bodily action. But this fragrance does not seem to truly enter that sense of movement in Chinese calligraphy. Instead, it turns its attention toward the interior of the scholar's studio: ink, black lacquer, paper, coffee, and a little orchid. It tries to create a quiet space rather than a character in the act of being written. The problem to me is that the paper accord does not feel very much like Chinese rice paper. The Chinese rice paper should have a gentler, softer, more absorbent texture, as if a little damp breath remains inside the fibers. But the paper in this fragrance feels more like modern printed paper. It's smooth and it's very, very clean. It's almost feels a bit edgy. It does not have an obvious ink wash feeling. It does not have the sense of ink spreading and blooming on rice paper. It feels more like a modern collection room. So conceptually, I do not think it is especially successful, but the scent itself is not bad. Paper and ink give it a clean, calm structure. The coffee in the dry dawn warms the space slightly, and the orchid is very faint, like a barely visible floral shadow in the space. It is not the Chinese calligraphy that I imagine, but it is a pretty nice paper and ink fragrance. Then there is Mooncake, and Mooncake is my favorite in the entire collection. But to like it, you first have to accept gourmand fragrances, because it really does have a strong red bean paste sweetness, along with golden syrup, lotus seed paste, honey, vanilla, and other sweet, moist elements. But to me, it does not collapse into a flat, ordinary dessert. What really makes it work for me is the salted egg yolk. The salted egg yolk gives the fragrance a grainy, slightly salty and oily texture. And this texture is very important to me because the most fascinating thing about mooncake is never the pure sweetness, but the layering of powderiness, stickiness, oiliness, sweetness, and this slight saltiness. Red bean paste and lotus seed paste are dense, sweet, and smooth. The egg yolk is a bit runny and grainy. The pastry skin is itself oily and moist. It is sweet, but this sweetness is balanced by the salted egg yolk. I think this one is very well done and quite original because of the really realistic quality or texture of the salted egg yolk. To me, it really recreates the structure of a mooncake. It is reconstructing a very private, very everyday Chinese experience in its food culture. It enters my cultural memory through food rather than through a grand narrative. I would recommend this one to people who enjoy gourmand fragrances. Next one, Pomelo Oolong. And my feelings about Pomelo Oolong are more complicated. It actually smells quite nice. Oolong tea, pomelo, osmanthus, white porcelain, and white musk combine to suggest a clean, transparent, slightly bitter, slightly sweet tea scent with a cool ceramic feeling. But the problem is that for me, it does not strongly trigger associations with Chinese culture. Maybe because I'm from northern China, and when I think about tea, Pomelo Oolong tea is truly not the first thing I think of. I actually feel that this is something I would more easily drink in a Japanese convenience store or in certain Asian tea shops. It is not that it smells bad, but it feels too much like an assignment. And the topic is elevated Asian tea fragrance. So it includes oolong, pomelo, osmanthus, and white musk. Every element is correct, but the whole thing does not offer many surprises to me. And overall, this fragrance slides too easily into a generalized Asian tea drink aesthetic. Clean, transparent, slightly bitter, sweet, very suitable for the international market and very suitable for being placed in a high-end fragrance boutique, but it is not necessarily very Chinese to me. It is more like a beautiful, standard, well-executed Asian tea scent. Next one, Princess of China, and Princess of China is my least favorite in this whole collection. First, the scent itself, it uses peony, white lotus, silk, lychee, and pear. And peony provides a bright floral note. White lotus brings a watery quality. Lychee and pear add transparent fruity sweetness, and silk is more of a textural imagination, perhaps expressed through smooth musks or a slight powderiness. It is very safe, very soft, and very easy to understand as some kind of like Eastern femininity. But the name Princess of China too easily turns Chinese women into an image of a soft, precious Eastern princess wrapped in silk and surrounded by flowers and fruits. Peony, white lotus, lychee, and pear are also very safe feminine symbols. But whose princess is this? From which dynasty? This cultural symbol is used too vaguely and too conveniently. It feels like the fragrance that most obediently answers the prompt in an exam-style essay, but the prompt itself is already problematic and dated. Its imagination of a Chinese princess is too close to what the international market expects from Eastern women. Gentle, refined, light, and without much subjectivity. This cultural imagination is a bit too old-fashioned for me. Next one is Spring Festival. And Spring Festival is my second favorite. The candied hawthorn note is very clear in this one, and there is also a little smokiness, which makes it very memorable. It really reminds me of eating tanghulu, which is a Chinese dessert made of hawthorn. So it reminds me of eating tanghulu at street markets during Spring Festival. There is the tartness of hawthorn, and in the air, there might be a little smoke from the stalls, cold wind in northern China, and the sound of crowds. It captures a very specific Spring Festival memory, not an abstract idea about family reunion, but that flash of sweetness in the mouth, the red candied skewer, and the liveliness of the winter street. So I really enjoy this one. But its problem is also obvious to me. It is too pleasing and too safe. Spring Festival is not just red lanterns and candy. Spring Festival can be about the kitchen, firecracker ash, dust in old houses, family pressure, the Spring Festival gala on TV, damp winter air, and the smell of paste from putting up couplets at the doorway. Spring Festival can be lively, but it can also be exhausting to a lot of people. This brand chooses the brightest, cutest, most tourist-friendly version of Spring Festival. It has imagery and it does genuinely trigger my memory. But what it presents is kind of like a postcard Spring Festival, not complex Spring Festival. I can understand this choice because it fits the tone of the collection very well. What it wants is delight, accessibility, and a festive image that people can enter immediately. Finally, I have Silk Road. And this should be the most ambitious and historically imaginative fragrance in this coat collection because the Silk Road is not a single scene. Behind it are trade, empire, frontiers, religion, spices, leather, horses, deserts, travelers, cultural exchange. It is the subject in this set most capable of supporting the word majestic. The official notes include spices, tobacco leaf, ginseng, leather, and vetiver. This choice is reasonable to me. It tries to create a dry, spicy, medicinal, leathery, dusty direction. The problem is that it does not smell as expensive or as rough as I expected. It is actually very soft. It does not really take you into wind-blown sand, horses, and long journeys in the West. What I anticipated the most was the ginseng, because ginseng is a material with a strong Chinese medicinal bodily experience. If it had been made more prominent, then this fragrance could have jumped out from the ordinary Silk Road spicy leather structure and become a Chinese scent with a tonic-like dry root herbal pharmacy quality. But in reality, the ginseng feels more like something conceptually listed in the notes. It is swallowed by the other spices and never truly steps forward. So for me, this one does not quite work. It carries the grandest historical narrative, but the scent cannot support that grandness. It is not the Silk Road in my imagination. So to summarize, I think the most interesting thing about the Majestic China collection is that it is called Majestic China, but the parts that truly touches me or that truly smell good and feel alive are actually all in the small things like mooncakes or candied hawthorn. A very specific texture, a very specific flavor that can be remembered by my body. So when it tries to move toward larger cultural symbols like Chinese princess, the Silk Road, civilization, calligraphy, it easily becomes more conceptual, more exhibition-like. But when it lowers its gaze and makes a mooncake, makes a skewer of candied hawthorn, it comes much closer to my real olfactory memory and experience. So this collection to me is not an introspective and layered Chinese narrative with philosophical complexity and depth. It is younger, it is more dessert-like, and more suitable for introducing Chinese-themed perfumes to someone who is not yet very familiar with these cultural references. So if you want to smell a complete, complex, even slightly contradictory China, then the set may not be enough. But if you want to see how a Vietnamese brand organizes Chinese culture into 6 clear, pretty, wearable, olfactory entry points, then it is worth trying. And that's it for today's video. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Bye bye.